if you're telling everybody, we have scientific evidence, we have scientific evidence, we have scientific evidence, but not a single person outside of your group can see it, what kind of scientific glasses are you wearing?
Mm-hmm. Adam, per his Twitter, well, formerly known as Twitter bio, is a Christian thinker, YouTuber, friend of atheists, and conversationalist. Did I get all that right, Adam? Does that sound good?
That's right. That's me.
Perfect. That's a good bio. So just a little background. I was introduced to your content, Adam, through obviously Twitter or X, through some of your posts and your engagements over curious questions and various questions. And then I just so happened to discover your content, and then you did the debate recently. So I saw that, and it was just like all the timing worked out, and then scheduled an interview podcast for us to debrief, ask some questions of our own, hopefully. Maybe not anything that's groundbreaking, but maybe we'll rehash some of the same issues and questions. But we're excited to dig into Genesis, specifically. How do we interpret Genesis, the age of the earth, maybe some things about young earth creationism itself. Yeah, excited to dig into it. But Adam, do you want to give yourself maybe a more in-depth introduction than was provided there for yourself? Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I really am. I'm here on online, on Twitter, on X, on YouTube. My own podcast will be officially launching coming up here soon. I know it's been too long of a delay for that. And then, yeah, I am perhaps the chosen one to bring to light Genesis 3:14 through 19. And so if you guys haven't checked out some of my work on that, you should definitely do so. And hopefully I will get that book released on Genesis 3:16 soon. So, but other than that, I am here to crush young earth creationism biblically, and really looking forward to the conversation with you guys.
That's a great intro. So that's
what
what we need. We need something that's hard hitting like
crazy.
that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, the first question I had, Adam, was just for you to share some of your story, maybe how you can share about how you came to the faith, and then maybe a little bit into how this developed into this curiosity and even some skepticism of religious beliefs, and then went into where you're at now, which is having a platform to discuss these types of issues.
Yeah, so this is one of the questions that I love. So I grew up in a Christian home. I was actually homeschooled. And fortunately, most people actually don't know that. They all kind of go like, you were homeschooled? You look so normal. That was a process. Yep. So maybe did it look as normal growing up? Who knows? But basically, I grew up in a Christian home. And then when I turned, 18, 19, as I graduated high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I decided that I wanted to go back and stay with my grandparents. So I decided to move out for a while. And during that period, I really wanted to sort out some things for myself. And one of those was my Christian faith. I decided okay, I've never seriously challenged my faith. So I want to know, is this the truth, or is it just going to be the faith of my parents? And so I set out on a journey. I decided that I wanted to do some deep, deep discussion, and I wanted to meet other people. So I went to the Mormon church. I went to Catholic church. I'm Protestant, by the way. So I went to the JWs, the Seventh-day Adventists. I was listening to atheists. I was talking to Muslims, looking at online articles, people that left the faith, people that left Christianity. And so for about 6 to 8 months, I was doing a deep dive. I was looking at all of the objections to Christianity. Was the virgin birth real? Does the Bible even prophesy a virgin birth? Why does it matter? And so I was tremendously interested in all the controversial topics. And so I literally, for about 4 to 6 hours a day, that's what I was doing. And I was asking my grandfather every single day, questions, new questions, yeah, but what about this? And I just want to say I was incredibly blessed to have a grandfather who was really, really open. He was just open-handed, and he would explain like, oh, people think this for this reason, and they think it for this reason. And he was not so dogmatic as to just tell me, you just need to have more faith. You just believe. Why are you asking these questions?
Yeah.
And I think that was so incredibly important in development for me. And then after about that 6 to 8 month period, I just became convinced. I felt like I was finding really good answers to the questions I was asking, really good answers to the objections that were being posed by others. And I also did feel like I had personal experiences with the Holy Spirit during that period. And so it was so important for me. And then the really next big turn happened about like 5 or 6 years later when the new wave of atheism came. And that new wave of atheism brought new questions, new objections that I hadn't heard before. And this became a tremendous threat and struggle for me because I was a rationalist. And what that meant was that I was only willing to believe that which I could understand. And if I couldn't understand it, I was like, okay, I'm going to reject it. And so atheism was coming out with another question, another one. And I was searching vigorously to find the answers because my entire faith held in the balance. And as a result, I was running out of energy. You know, in many ways, I was a skeptic. But I believed because I found the answers. And at this point, though, I was just getting tired because I'm literally like, I felt the burden of finding the answer. And we're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into philosophy and questions about time and God's comprehensibility. Like, is it even make sense to believe in God?
Yeah.
And so all of this led for me constantly searching for the answer. So if you're wondering like, oh man, why do you know that? Because it was the struggle of my own heart. The reason I know these things is because like I wanted to know, I had to know. And it was a friend of mine, a philosopher actually, who set me free. And he did it kind of haphazardly. We were just on a phone call one day and he was talking about actually Genesis, believe it or not. He was talking about Genesis 1. And he was like, yeah, my pastor was preaching on Sunday. And he was talking about the Bible. And he's like, you know what? If you don't allow God and his authority to be an answer above what you believe. In other words, like if you say, I only believe if I can understand, then you have decided to put your own mind above God. And when he said that, I totally got it. Like it just instantly clicked for me. And that's what really, really set me free. And it was totally a combination of that and realizing that, you know what? Christianity is not a set of propositions. It's not just these intellectual thoughts and beliefs, but it really helped me grow in my personal relationship with Christ. And so today I realized that you have to believe in order to be free. It's not that like, oh, I have to find all the answers and then I can be free. It's like, no, you have to believe in order to be free. And that is actually where Curious Christianity was born out of, is that once you believe, now I have the freedom to explore, to ask the tough questions of the Bible, because you know what? My faith no longer stands in the balance, right? Like I can ask the tough questions about Genesis, about Paul, about anything in the New Testament, and it's going to be fine because I know where my salvation is and it's founded in Christ. And so now we can talk about all of the difficult things in the Bible and not be shaken.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah. How is with that upbringing and that experience, how is engaging more in a content creation space, has that maybe changed your approach, or how has that impacted maybe the issues that you're willing to speak on or address, or is it just open-ended?
Yeah, so I'm still developing and growing through the whole process. So there's actually almost a slightly separate story, but I actually felt called by God to be much more on social media and all of that stuff. I did not want this life for me. Like totally upfront, like my ideal life and thought process growing up, I wanted the 9 to 5 white picket fence, get married, have kids, go to work, go to a barbecue on Memorial Day life. I hated the idea of being on social media. Like, I mean, it literally brought me fear. Not going to lie. I felt called by God long before that ever felt okay. And I'll tell you, man, the first few posts that I ever made, I literally would just look away and click publish. Like, I didn't want to do it. And so today I've gotten over most of that. But I'm still just working. Honestly, I would say my bigger struggle just happens to be with, like, I actually have so much content in my head to share that I don't know when or where. Like, it's more difficult for me organizing. I really just need like a secretary to like help line things up. Yeah. So it's, for me, coming here and talking with you guys, 10 times easier than generating my own content, because you guys ask the questions and it's like, yeah, I just want to be here and ask questions. I've got tons of information to share. But deciding what goes where and all that, that's the more laborious part to me.
That's great, because you're making our job easier, because we don't have to we don't have to do all the research on our end to like come up with all the answers for whatever stream topic. So this is great. We can ask the questions. Questions to the expert. Questions to the expert. I was wondering, quick question, preliminary. Adam, how long have you been doing the social media stuff?
I think it's been a couple years. I can't remember. Like, there's definitely been some gaps. So unfortunately, you know, life happens. So I'm trying to get much more involved now. You know, I've had like some spurts where I was like, okay, publishing a bunch. So I would say, like, yeah, you know, starting. It's been a little while. Like, really being more involved has probably just within the last year. It's probably been the most active.
Okay. Seth, anything preliminary you want to cover?
Yeah, I guess. What's your overall goal with social media?
I want to improve biblical dialogue. So for me, this will sound terrible, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm a little bored of Christian apologetics. I'm definitely well trained in Christian apologetics, but if you've been in it for a long time, most of the arguments are the same. You know, most of the questions are the same. Oh, how do you explain evil? How do you explain the resurrection? How do you explain creation? Fill in the blank. Like, most of the arguments are the same. And, you know, so it's like, not super interesting. I'm much more interested in having interfaith dialogues with other Christians. And I'm interested in biblical theology. Like, I want to explain and show, like, hey, let's talk about the Bible. And so I feel like there hasn't been enough conversation and dialogue amongst Christians in many areas. And this has actually led, I think, to stunted growth in some areas of Christian development. And it comes back to kind of actually what I talked about initially, and that's that Christians are afraid of the answers. Right? We hold to certain dogmas or faiths because it's like, well, you know, new theology is heresy, right? I mean, there's like a whole t-shirt for that. But I would suggest that, hey, look, theologians make mistakes. Christians made mistakes. And I want to restore, like, I think that there are some areas where Christians have missed out on the truth of what the Bible was actually saying. And they did it because of fear. They were afraid, like, oh, but if we go into this, maybe this is going too liberal, right? Maybe this will lead us into process theology or progressive theology, and so they wanted to be the frozen chosen, right? They don't want to move or do anything. It's like, no. But the pastor said this, so that's it. And like I said, the point of curious Christianity is once you're free, you can explore. You can ask tough questions. You can ask questions that don't necessarily even matter, you know, but I think that also, it opens up all sorts of interesting possibilities and understandings of the Bible itself. So I think that's missing out for a lot of people that are still reading their Bibles going, man, the Bible's boring. And I'm like, that's because you haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
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 I wonder. Oh, Seth, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask, do you have any formal academia backing? Because for me, I didn't ever get really interested in all of this until I really hit college. That's like kind of well, and then like senior year of high school, since I was looking into going into college, that's what really piqued my interest in what I wanted to fully study and what made me more nerd out on this stuff than most people. Um, I don't know if I've heard of people, which it sounds like you, because you didn't mention going to college, of just self searching in these things, which is way more difficult, I feel like, than what I'm doing because I'm just learning from professors.
Yeah, that's right. So yes, by and large, I'm self-taught. I don't know how else to say it. I'm self-taught. Now, I did just graduate from Manny University with my bachelor's degree in divinity 2 months ago.
Congrats.
So this summer.
Yeah, congrats.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Cool.
I have I don't have a great relationship with academia.
Yeah. Maybe because you were
now,
finding
that's
all the
not to
answers
say-
on your own.
To some degree, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't have a great relationship with academia, and yeah, but we could do a whole episode just on that. There are so many things I have to say about that. Now, I'll tell you about this. I talked to this one professor one time who I wanted to know some things from. Well, it's that. And so like I had one friend one time, he was like, hey, like Adam, wouldn't you just love to go to college and like get around with a bunch of other students who are really passionate about learning and growing and like be in that community and talking with them? And I was kind of like, no, I'm talking with the professors right now. Why would I want to go and talk with all the grad students who are, I feel like you'll be asking like way more preliminary questions. Like, but yeah, I talk with way more professors now. And so this one occasion I was talking with this professor from Dallas Theological Seminary, and he's a much older guy. He's like 70s or something like that. And oh man, like, okay. So like today I'm way more mellow out and toned down. I was super edgy and anti-authority growing up. I'm way more toned down now. And so I talked to him and he was brutal against academia. He basically was like, academics are morons. And I mean, seriously, he was absolutely just like, he's like, you know what you could do? Take all your commentaries and burn them. His word was, I've got a quote. I've got one big quote from him that I just have never, ever, ever forgotten. And it's this: it's amazing how much light the Bible sheds on commentaries.
That's good.
And I'll be honest, I have found that to be demonstrably true in several scenarios. And I've got one other friend who is a very good biblical student scholar. He's a pastor in Tennessee, my good buddy Andrew. And I trust him more than I do commentaries, you know, because a lot of commentaries, they actually don't do their own grassroots research. They echo what the other guy said. And so there are sometimes when it's real simple, the theologian didn't go back and do his homework. And guess what? If somebody messes up, then they just repeat that error over and over and over and over again. So
I wanted to ask you a question going back to kind of how apologetics became boring for you. And it's because I definitely share that sentiment to some regard in my own life. But I'm wondering, I want to get your opinion on, I think part of that is because Christians became reactive to the new atheist movement, or really just atheism in general, where atheist or skeptic claims and questions were setting the dialogue, and all of the interactions were according to atheist terms and conditions. And so I think like what you're doing is so interesting because you're being proactive. Hey, I'm going to go come up with new questions and new answers to things that maybe people in the faith haven't thought of before. And I think that that's so it's needed, but also I can see what you're saying, where a lot of Christians are like, well, that gets scary because we're so used to being on the defense. We've never really been on the offense, so to speak, in that way.
Yeah, no, that's 100% true. And to be honest, actually, I want to shift this slightly and say that I'm actually greatly concerned for the modern apologist. So, and I've seen this on a few occasions, and that is that now we introduce apologetics at the teenager level, right? If not middle school, right? And so let's take a young guy who grows up in a conservative home, hits high school, introduced to apologetics. And so now let's take him from that to college, right? So now let's say he's 24, right? So he's 24, he's married, right? Maybe starting his first child.
He's me.
There you go.
That's Josh. Yeah, that's
me.
literally Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've been studying apologetics for 10 years, right? And pretty much you can answer any question. Any street atheist that wants to hammer at you, boom, there's the answer, right? Now, here's the deal. All you've been doing in your life is answering questions. But what happened to that relationship with Christ? And I've seen some other guys begin to go through burnout because the primary reason that they're studying scripture is answering questions and not growing in faith. And I think that that is a serious concern, in my opinion, because I'm looking at the next 5 to 10 years, and many of the young apologists have more head knowledge than they do walk with Christ. And I think that that is very concerning.
And it definitely seems like some of those, I was going to say, it definitely seems like some of those types are, if they do deconvert, they're sometimes the most extreme atheists on the other end because of that same, they're wired that way because they've been on the defense in that way. So I've seen it, like I've seen it in my own life. It's been a challenge in my own life. Like, okay, if I were to leave this, I would be extreme atheist in terms of my challenging of Christian beliefs. So it's like, that's always something I'm wrestling with too, is like, okay, am I treating this relationship with Christ with the intimacy and not just the head knowledge? It's definitely a fear of mine though. Cause thinking about like, this battle that gets set up for young apologists can sometimes turn and then they end up on the other side.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's actually another thing that I hope to do a little bit more with some of my channel is that, I want to also talk about and share about spiritual healing, about emotional healing, about, connection, relationship with Christ, because it's not all about just the intellectual answers. And I totally get it. Look, I am geared that way. Like that was the other thing. I didn't value personal experience growing up. But today I do. I see its value, and you need both. You need personal experience and you need the intellectual side. They shouldn't be apart or separate from one another. And some people just holistically ignore one or the other. You know, some people are just all into experience. And then there's a great example. I think it was one of the lead Hillsong worshipers, right? You know, and then this is his life, right? Worship, worship, worship. And then he comes out and he's like, struggling with my faith, pretty much kind of leaving. And then you listen like, well, why are you leaving? And he brings up these different objections. And for any apologist, you're like, that's it? That's your intellectual objection? Yeah. Like, are you serious? Because the rest of us are going like, those are easily, readily answerable, right? But for him, couldn't overcome them, right? And then, and then you have the other ones, right? Where they're all head knowledge, and then a emotional experience happens in their life, right? And it's a huge crisis of faith. Like, God, where are you? I don't understand anymore, right? They had all this knowledge, and then guess what? Life experience happens. You know, you lose your wife to cancer, you lose your favorite family member, whatever it is. And now you're like, whoa. I don't know what's going on anymore. And you need both.
Yeah, it's so good. I can transition us into the discussion that we scheduled, which is good. We could do a whole podcast on apologetics and That's all good. We'll just invite
For
you
another
back
day.
and we'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the subject matter, we're talking about Genesis and its interpretation. How old is the earth? You just recently did a debate on this subject. And so before potentially laying out your arguments regarding Genesis and its interpretation, I'd just love to ask you on the outset, why do you think interpreting Genesis is important for the Christian worldview?
That's a really tough question. I mean, to me, I would say honestly, truth is always the biggest thing, right? And we always want more truth than falsehood. The devil plays in the darkness. And so we should want to be as accurate as possible. Unfortunately, we can't always agree. That's life. I also just think that's something else that some of us have to be comfortable with, is disagreeing. So it's definitely one of those things that Ken Ham has taken this Genesis thing to a whole new level of like, no, this is the gospel, and all of that stuff. And and honestly, at this point, part of the reason that I'm out here arguing for this stuff is because I think that a lot of other Christians are basically deceived concerning the subject in some arenas. And now look, that's pretty heavy language. That's super heavy language. And my goal with a lot of these conversations concerning Genesis is to bring clarity and education to the subject. Look, it's one thing if I talk to a young earth creationist and they understand all the same arguments and all these things. But I would say way over half the time when I'm discussing the subject of Genesis, they're completely ignorant of what's in the text. Forget about all of the other theological implications. I can just ask you a few biblical questions and they'll be like, I don't know. But they don't even know what's in the text. They're so used to all the rhetoric that they don't know their own Bible. And so to me, like, education is a huge part of it. To me, it's like, yeah, look, you at least should know what's in the text. Everyone's interpreting the Bible without even knowing what's in it. So I just don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's good. Seth, do you have anything? I mean, I can keep running down, but
yeah, I mean, I guess, how do you, before we get into how to interpret or how you interpret Genesis in of itself, how do you interpret the Bible as a whole? Do you try to like make them? Yeah, I mean, I guess I can just leave it there.
How do I interpret the Bible as a whole? All right.
Yeah.
You guys said where this is going 24-hour podcast, right? 24 hours, we're going to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where's a 48-hour podcast? Yeah. Part 1, part 2.
Yeah. So hermeneutics, the study and art, science of interpreting scripture. I'm a really big fan of that. And that would actually be one of the aspects that I think still needs refining. Still needs work. And I think a lot of bad interpretations are due to bad hermeneutics. So I would say that you have to interpret each book according to its own genre, context. I do believe that you should interpret scripture with scripture. But what you're asking, is a massive monolithic question.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's a big question.
Let's take a couple examples though. Okay. Let's take the book of Genesis. Let's only take chapters 12 through 50. All right. And so when we read the book of Genesis, it's Old Testament narrative. Okay. Right. Now, when we read the Gospels, is it the same genre? Because they're both telling stories, right? Oh, and Jesus did this, and Jesus did this. And then you read Genesis like, oh, and Joseph did this, and Jacob did this, and Isaac did this. And one might think to a large degree that, oh, yeah, they're the same. They're the same, right? But the gospel writers, they're all doing different things, right? So they have different thematic elements that they're drawing on and calling back to the Old Testament. So you should interpret it according to the Old Testament. And you should go back and read the Old Testament. And you should see it's like, oh, well, when they're talking about Jesus being, the fountain of living waters, where does that idea come from? Oh, it goes back there. Then when you talk about Genesis and you read the stories, like, wait. This is not prescriptive. This is not Paul, right? Paul is speaking like, oh yeah, do this. This is good doctrine. This is bad doctrine. Instead, you should read it more like a movie where it's got these different thematic elements. I'll give you like an example here. All right. So in the story of Jacob and Esau, here's one of the questions I asked myself, right? That just bugged me so much. Does Jacob get away with it? That's the question. He lies to his dad, steals Esau's blessing, and then runs away. So, does Jacob get away with it? Right?
I feel like
it does kind of seem like he does.
But see, that's why you have to get my own hermeneutics class to find the answer. No, I'm just
yeah.
No, because, so you know what? I will suggest to you, the answer is no. How do you know he doesn't get away with it? Because it's like watching a movie. You have to make sure and go through the end of the story. Here's the first sign that he doesn't get away with it. Remember, he tricks his dad. He tricks his dad by wearing goat skin, by feeding him goat meat, right? And then he also tricks him by saying like, oh yeah, this isn't my name. And his dad can't see, right? Okay. So then when he goes to Laban and he gets tricked, he's expecting what? The younger daughter. And instead the older daughter comes in and he doesn't know that it's her because he can't see her because she wore a veil over her face. So when he tricks his dad got the younger when he was expecting the older. And when he got tricked, he got the older when he was expecting the younger. And both because they couldn't see who it was coming in. So he was tricked in the same way his dad was. So there's an inversion. And the text is telling you like, oh yeah. Guess what? That seems like some just desserts right there, right? So then guess what? When Joseph is killed or supposed to have been killed, what deceives his father? The coat of many colors, which seems to represent the goat skin. And then it specifically mentions that they sprinkle goat's blood on the coat. So he's deceived by a goat, just like he deceived his own father with a goat. So that seems, again, like some pretty just desserts that he did eventually kind of get payback for what he did earlier in the chapter or in the book.
That's interesting. I've never even thought about it.
I haven't.
That's good. Notice the parallels. Do you think part of that, would you say, Adam, is that because it is more narratively constructed by a writer, or is that just God influencing the parallel? Maybe it's a bit of both. God influencing the parallels.
I certainly think that it's both, but I think that my primary point is, how should we understand the story? And my primary point is, the story is giving you the lesson when you understand the whole story. It's trying to teach you something. So in other words, like, this is the frustrating part to me about some commentators is they're like, well, the text doesn't say that. And I'm like, yeah, but when I watch Interstellar, it doesn't say a lot either, right? You're supposed to read between the lines. That's the point of the story. And I think that a lot of these stories, that's what they're doing. They're showing these elements and they're connecting certain lines. And so you're supposed to read and watch the whole story. And then when you get to a certain part, you'll be like, hey, remember when this happened earlier in the story? That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be making that connection like, holy cow, that's right. He was talking about that earlier. So yeah, I think that's what I'm saying, like concerning hermeneutics and like, how should you interpret it? What should you be following? You should be following the whole narrative. You shouldn't just be going like, well, it doesn't say that.
Yeah, I mean, this probably goes a little bit into this question with Genesis, but why do you think Genesis in particular is such a contested slash contentious issue among believers and skeptics?
Oh, there's a lot of answers to that question. I mean, one of the reasons is because of the young earth creationist movement. They've made it more contentious, right? So it's not just that you're getting pressure from secularism. So they've made it contentious on one end, but then there's been a heavy response from Christians. And I'll say that I totally understand the idea of the response and not wanting to just give in or acquiesce to all of the secular forces that, you know, do have agendas. There are agendas all over the place. So I'm not going to say that there aren't different goals and objectives. So that has really left things hanging in the balance. And then a lot of it has been what we talked about a little bit ago. And that's that for many other believers, their faith is built on a glass table, right? And so if it cracks in Genesis, if there's a weakness, oh, wait, the authority of Scripture, the Bible, Genesis is false, for most of them, their entire faith would just cave in. And I know people like that, right? One of them, that was his thing, right? Oh, I started to find out that, you know, whatever, the earth is old or fill in the blank. Yeah. And that was it. He was like, okay, wait, I'm leaving this Christianity thing. It's false. And that would have been me too, many years ago. So most Christians do not have a robust faith where it's like, it's not one glass table. There's a whole bunch of different sections of it. And so most of them are fighting just to hold it together. Yeah. So I think that is one of the big reasons. And it's just been, well, the other thing that I'll say is that Genesis is really way more complex than most people think. I was shocked personally when I decided to start to dive into Genesis 1. I was just amazed at how much material there was, how much scholarship there was. I once led a small group. We talked about Genesis 1 for 4 weeks, like every single week, just Genesis 1. And I didn't even get through all the information I had, you know, before moving on. And that was just espousing different views. And I even left out other gap views and other stuff like that. And so there's just so much writing and things to consider that, yeah, it's not hard to believe that it's contentious because there's so much knowledge and information on it. So.
Yeah. I mean, it reminded me of a question that I had on the complexity issue of Genesis and other passages of Scripture. I was wondering if you could, I don't know, I'm going to ask this bluntly, so I don't know how to ask this, but do you think Christianity has been dumbed down? Like there is an intellectual understanding that some people don't understand, or a barrier that maybe people don't credit to it, or I'm trying to ask, like, it seems like sometimes growing up, a lot of us rely on the Sunday school stories, and then we kind of add some complexity to that, but when it's all said and done, we end up kind of going back, like you talked about, how they end up just not having answers at all, and it's just the Sunday school stories. And it seems like you grow up and you ask these questions. I mean, you spent 6 hours a day trying to find answers to these questions. It seems like there's an intellectual barrier there. And so, yeah, how do you respond to that? What are your thoughts on, is there an intellectual barrier to Christianity?
In some circles, right? So this is just always the way it is. Like every now and then I'll hear someone go like, oh, you know, whatever. Muslims are just silly because they don't study. They don't know what the Quran says. This is just true of every faith. No, it doesn't matter if it's Christianity, Mormonism, like everybody. You can go and find a Jewish person that doesn't know the Torah. I mean, and you can find a Christian that doesn't know what their Bible is, you know? And then of course the famous moment of Richard Dawkins, which was, you know, because he was criticizing Christians because they didn't know all the Gospels, right? And they asked him, so Richard, what was the name of Charles Darwin's book. What was the original name? And Richard didn't remember in the interview.
Oh no.
So anyway, that's just how it is, you know? So yeah, I definitely, in some circles there is. And again, part of it stems from lots of different things. One of it stems from personalities, right? The difference is some people are teachers, right? They're gifted teachers. And so they're going to be like this. They're going to be intellectual and they're going to think about this, and they're not going to be as much about experience. But then other pastors are way more experience oriented, right? And so for them, they're like, why do those things matter? Because I have Jesus, I have the Holy Spirit, and I regularly experience it. So if I'm experiencing it, who cares? Right? So in certain circles, and then the other ones, they're the protectionists. In the protectionist homes, they are a little bit more anti-intellectual because they don't want to allow all these other things in there. So, but I just want to throw in an additional little plug here concerning apologetics, because this is something that I'm sort of passionate about. And you know what? There was a mother that was once coming and wanted to talk to me a little bit more about these things because she was a homeschool mom. She had 9 children. Okay. And I think the first 2 older ones, they've already left the faith. You know, they had your very standard story, grew up Christian home, hit college, and within the first 2 years, they're out, right? They're out of Christianity. And she was really thinking like, okay, she's honestly mourning the loss of her children. But at the same time, she wants to know, how can I fix this for my younger ones? Because I still have 7 other children. And one of the big things that I think needs to be done is what I would call inoculation. So, and I learned this a little bit more when I went to an intro to philosophy class. I had a great philosophy professor at community college. I'll never forget this guy as long as I live. His name is Jesse Newton. So not to out him too much, but his name was Jesse Newton. And in great philosophy fashion, what does he do? He builds up an argument and then he smashes it by the end of class, right? So by the end of class, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's totally true, right? And then he's like, yeah, but that doesn't work for this reason, right? Crushes it. And so here's my point, is that I think that every apologetics class, every Sunday school class, you should teach your young Christian students a Christian argument that's pro-Christianity and destroy it and show them why it doesn't work. Because here's the point. Your faith does not hang on that one argument. Our faith is built on Jesus Christ. And if you allow one argument to be monolithic and to hold the rest of your faith intact, you know what? There are some things you probably learned that are wrong. And so when somebody points out like, oh, here was where you were completely wrong about this part in the Bible, you can be like, oh, well, thanks for showing me. Now I'll change that biblical view. And you can move on. So I think that inoculation will make one's Christian faith much more robust and strong. And if you just make it one solid piece, eventually somewhere somebody went wrong and it'll eventually crack and then it'll finally break.
That's good.
Yeah. I actually, you mentioned being so protective and you kind of hit it there. Do you think that that level of retreatism, I guess it's kind of like a question on academia as well. Do you think that as Christians, we're called to be sent in the world more than what a lot of Christians are currently doing?
I do. Yeah, much more. Yeah. So I've actually thought about and talked a little bit about that today. To some degree, I think more Christian influencers are needed than Christian apologists. I would say that one of my biggest flaws still, I still want to do more, is just to be present. Just to be present in the spaces, be present in the secular spaces. Because I've been in some different spaces on X where there are just a few Christians and they're asking questions, and their questions are not actually that difficult to answer, but they find these to be tremendously difficult, huge. Oh my gosh, you know? And then I come and answer them and they're just like, wow, I've never thought of that before. And it's just like, any one of my friends, you know, could have answered this question. It's not extremely sophisticated. You know, that question was not one of the questions that I've spent hours and hours and hours studying. It was like, dude, that was like a surface softball question, right? But you know what? For them, they were just like, that was eye-opening. And it's like, dude, just be present. We need you to be present somewhere. There needs to be just a Christian voice, the voice of reason that says, yeah, look, this is the answer. And so, yeah, I find just being present is so important. And like, there was this one time I was in a atheist space, right? It was just me. It was just one Christian surrounded by 7 atheists. And some of them, not all of them, some of them were the vitriolic type. Okay. And the other ones were more mellow. But the way that they talked prior to me being in there and the way they talked for me while I was in there were certainly different. And I get it. Like that's normal. But that was one of the biggest ways and areas in which, you know, I was a bigger testimony being there. And that's all they did. Actually, once I got in there, that's all they wanted to do was ask me questions, and several of them as well. What were they doing? They were going like, wow, never heard that answer before. Never heard that answer before. Why? Because honestly, they don't talk to Christians all that much.
Right.
You know? And so just be present, show up.
That's good. On Genesis, how do you, no, that was the next question. What is the biblical purpose from your perspective of the Genesis creation account?
Yeah. So number one, of course, I think it's primarily showing God's sovereignty, how he's the one who has set all of this up. And then number two, it is establishing mankind as his vice regent, as his Lord that he has planned and established over the earth. So that's Genesis 1. And your question is about Genesis 1, right?
Yeah. That works. That's the creation account. So yeah. That's primarily what's going on there. I think. I mean, that goes into, you can kind of share a little bit about your perspective about how do we even interpret Genesis? How do you interpret Genesis? Or what do you think is the best way to interpret Genesis?
That's a little tricky, I guess. Because you're talking about interpretive method. It's a little tricky. Because I guess to me, honestly, I feel like when I hear you ask that, I feel like you're asking, what's your conclusion? Not really what's the painstaking method of going through this. And so part of the whole point behind my debate and argument and the arguments that I want to put forward recently. So for instance, you know, I got feedback from several of my friends, and probably almost all of them were all kind of like, yeah, never heard those arguments before. Never heard anyone argue this way. And part of my major point is to say, it's like, why not? To me, what I put forward is a very straightforward way. Let's imagine I was going to do hermeneutics or exegete, bring out the truth of a text. That's how I would do it. You would systematically go through, look at the verses, like, oh yeah, what's the major parts? What is calling back to different parts? So like, let's talk a little bit about Genesis 1 more specifically, right? To talk about why or how I'm parsing some of these things out, right? It's like, okay, cool. And actually I'll put this to you. Okay. No looking yet. Looking yet, but here's my question.
I did have it pulled up because I was going to share, but go ahead.
I know. On what day did God create the heavens and the earth?
That's funny because I just listened. I just listened to the debate like today, so it's like.
I mean, I would say like probably on day one, because in the beginning is what makes my brain think that that's the beginning of time. That's what probably if I were to read it right now, that's what I would say.
That's what you'd say, Seth, too?
Yeah, day one.
Okay, right. So, and a lot of people would say day one. So, do you think that the day one starts with "and God said"? Each of the days, right? And God said, and there was evening and morning. And God said, there's evening and morning.
Mm-hmm. That was the only one that didn't have that.
It didn't.
What was your question again? Do I think the first day starts with
on what day? On what day did God create the heavens and the earth?
So it'd be day 0. I don't.
Day -1.
Day -1.
Well,
I'm not
the text
sure.
just says.
Yeah. I'm not trying not to cheat. Yeah. What the text is. Yeah. I feel like I'm doing what I said other people do, but I would go back to Sunday school and well, it's like day 1.
Yeah, and the text just says, right, in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was void and formless. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the waters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then God said, "Let there be light," and he separated the light from the darkness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then doesn't it sound like he creates the heavens and the earth before day one?
Yeah.
We found
I was stunned.
Yeah. To me, it sounds like that.
I was stunned when I decided to study the subject. I was like, oh, let me open up my Bible and read it. And I just read those first 2 verses. It was just like, oh my gosh, what? Now, and I'm just saying, like, on a plain, literal reading of the text, that's the way it seems. Without even a great deal of further analysis. Now, there's a whole lot more to be said about it, but it's like, okay, that's kind of how it seems to start. And so then it's like, okay, well, now let's go through these 6 days of creation, right? And it's like, boom, 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 boom. And what do I see? It's like, I see patterns. You should interpret a text according to its literary structure. Okay? Right?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's like, if Genesis 1 has a literary structure, what is it? What is it? And this was essentially part of my argument during my debate that I did with Matt, the Apologeti. And it's like, well, yeah, there seems to be this, and God said, and then it ends with there's evening and morning. And that occurs 6 times. So that's 6. But if I start in verse 1, it breaks that pattern. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because then day 1 would be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So then I should see if there are any other patterns. And there are a bunch of word patterns. So for instance, God said occurs 10 times. According to the kinds, that occurs 10 times. Right? So there's all these different things that are starting to match up, and it's like, well, this is sounding weird. And so, like, for instance, the numbering part, right? Here's a further question for you. And this is part of my point about other young earth creationists just not even knowing the text.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't day 2 good? Of all the days of creation, why is day 2 not good? Because it doesn't say that day 2 is good. Every day is said to be good except for day 2. And it's like, well, what's your explanation? right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
I'd ask
most
Adam
people,
from Curious Christian to tell me.
yeah. So like to me, this is a huge detail that I'm just saying is like it's just part of the text. Like this is just a fact of the text, right?
Right.
So that's what I mean. Is like, okay, wait, you're all interpreting the text. You don't even know what it says, you know. And so I'm just saying, like the bare minimum, we should get all the facts, and then start to add them up, and then start to say things. So part of this is the point of like, oh well, if you want to interpret a text, you should try and see what's in there before trying to interpret it. So the reason is because good is mentioned 7 times. And 7 is the number of completion. And therefore, because it is 7, it is trying to declare that all of the days are good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Had they mentioned it 8 times, then it'd be like, oh, okay, so there are 8 things that are good. Right? Instead of everything being good. Same thing with according to the kinds. Are there only 10 things that are according to their kind? Probably not. But since it is 10, it is a completeness, all according to the kinds. So it's starting to show these different patterns. And likewise, days 1 through 3 end up matching up with days 4 through 6. And it's like, oh, well, that works only if you don't include the first 2 verses. Only if you don't include the first 2 verses of the text. Then days 1 through 3 match with days 4 through 6. So look, on the first 3 days, separation of light and darkness, separation of waters above and the waters below, separation of the water from the lands, and then plants on there. And then days 4 through 6, right? Sun, moon, and stars seem to match with the light and the darkness. Mm-hmm. The birds of the air and the birds and the sea creatures match with the waters above and the waters below. And then the land and the plants match with the animals and mankind. Mm. So it's like, well, wow, there's another literary structure, right? But then again, the first 2 verses seem like a summary statement, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, oh, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth is void and formless, darkness over the surface of the deep, the Spirit of God hovers over the waters, right?
Yeah.
So what do we learn in anything? Context. We should interpret stuff according to context, right?
Yep.
So why is it that the 6 days of creation are all calling back to verse 2? Void, like emptiness, darkness. Why does God create light on the first day?
Come on, Seth. You have the answer.
I don't.
I just gave you the answer. It's at verse 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a callback to verse 2.
Because there's darkness over the surface of the deep. Right? So verse 3, the first day of creation is calling back to the darkness, and then he's separating the waters, right? Oh, formlessness and void, right? Oh, wait. If you're separating stuff, what are you doing? You're giving it form, right? You're separating the waters, you're shaping it, you're molding it, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, days 4, 5, and 6. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, it's void and formless, right? So it's empty and formless, right? What is he doing? Oh, you're filling in the gaps. Here come land animals. Here come, birds and sea creatures. And then comes man. Right? So I'm just saying, like, on a very straightforward hermeneutic and Bible study process that I learned in school, and through reading books, like, it's like, well, that makes lots of sense to me. Without doing too many gymnastics, you don't need to read any ancient Near Eastern material to just go like, oh, like I can see that, and I can see those connections, right?
And that connection and that conclusion is that, at least from your debate, you were saying that from this reading of Genesis, it's agnostic towards the age of the earth. Is that correct?
That's right. It's agnostic because verse 2 establishes that there is a material creation prior to day 1. The the 6 days of creation, they're all calling back to verse 2, right? So if there's already earth and water and all of this stuff
Right.
before day 1, that must mean there was a material creation prior to day 1 of the 6 days of creation. Therefore, you cannot know how old the earth is because it doesn't tell you when that physical raw material was created.
And so I'd love you to play devil's advocate for those that say, well, no, the earth is young. What are some of the most common arguments that you run into? Is it the genealogies that track back? I've seen, I mean, this was kind of brought up in your debate, but Mark 10:6, I think it's brought up a lot. Christ referring to in the beginning, they were male and female, things of that nature. What are some of the most common arguments that you run into that refute this or attempt to refute this agnostic perspective on Genesis 1?
Yeah. So one, this is definitely new arguments that I'm bringing forward. So I haven't really had too many attempts to some degree. But let me give you a few of the major arguments out there. So in the ones that were brought up during the debate, one is Mark 10:6. To be really blunt, I have no idea why this one is brought up. I really don't understand it as an argument at all. Like to say like, oh, in the beginning, God created, like, especially going against my view, like it does absolutely nothing. So to say like, oh, Adam and Eve were created in the beginning. Okay, cool. Are you saying they were created on day 1? Like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, everyone knows, nobody believes they're created on day 1. They're created on day 6 at like a minimum. So it's like, if they're created on day 6, but I'm saying that the earth existed before day 1 of the 6-day creation account, then how does that supposed to affect this? I don't understand. Right. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, oh, they're created in the beginning. Okay, well, the beginning in this case is obviously referring to the 6-day creation account. And all of my arguments show that the creation of the earth precedes day 1. Okay, so I don't think that one works. Exodus 20. This was probably the biggest contention in our debate. Exodus 20, which talks about the Sabbath day. And it's like, oh, for in 6 days, the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the seas and all that are in them. And it's like, okay, cool. But why wouldn't you think, doing back to biblical studies and hermeneutics, right? My opponent was trying to say that you should interpret Genesis in light of Exodus 20. Why? That's backwards. You would always interpret Genesis 20 according to or detailed full account, which is Genesis 1. And so if my interpretation is correct, then you should understand Exodus 20 is referring to the 6 days of creation, like it's espousing. And the 6 days of creation, what it means when it says, oh, God created the seas, is that he separated the waters. That's what it means. And so that's what it's referring to, but it's not talking about the material creation of the seas, right? He's talking about the creation of it from that which was already there. And so, yeah, again, Exodus 20 doesn't do anything against my arguments because they're presupposing, they're begging the question to say that Exodus 20 works. In order to say that Exodus 20 works, they have to presuppose that their view is correct. But since I'm arguing about the very thing in question, you can't simply assert that Exodus 20 works. You have to show me from Genesis that it works. So,
yeah.
So you've got those ones. Now, the strongest argument, in my opinion, the only one, there's a few other arguments that you can go. Well, I'll mention the one other one. One is, so for them to kind of say that Genesis 1 and 2 is a summary statement. Okay, so it's a summary statement, and that it's referring to, it's referring to all this, this stuff is like, oh, not really being real. So it's to say it's like Genesis 1 and 2 isn't something that actually happens. It's just kind of summing up what's going on during the 6 days of creation, right? And so it's like, okay, but here's the problem. If it's not real, if there is no earth, waters, and the earth and waters are not void and formless, then why do the rest of the chapters presuppose it? So for example, on what day, I know, it's asking you guys so many questions. On what day does God create the water?
Day 0.
Well, I mean, the water was already there. Yeah. In the summer.
Yeah, it's already there. Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say we can't exactly know exactly what day.
Yeah, because it has to already be there. So if it's a summary statement that isn't talking about anything actually real, then you don't have any water. It doesn't make any sense of the rest of the chapter, because the rest of the chapter is presupposing that that's already there, right? Yeah. It doesn't make sense of the separating the light and the darkness. It doesn't make sense of separating the waters. Separating the waters from what? There's nothing there. Like, what are you talking about? So it has to be there. So I think that ultimately the best try is to say that the first 2 verses are part of day 1, right? But I think that this doesn't work as far as like an actual deep study, because all of the rest of the days, like I said, match days 1 through 6, only if you start with verse 3. But it completely separates and breaks all of the patterns if you include the first 2 verses, right? And then actually on the deeper points, and I know, but I'm just going to bring it up a little bit, but it's the Hebrew grammar. So the Hebrew grammar has something called what's called a vav consecutive. And what it does is it helps, it's a little thing in there that kind of connects sequences of events. And so the first vav consecutive, it shows up in verse 3. All right. So it kind of begins there with God said, and then it continues throughout days 1 through 6. Now, the point here is this. It creates a grammatical barrier from connecting the first 2 verses with verse 3. You can't really connect those two as the first 2 verses being part of the sequence. The beginning of the sequence starts in verse 3 and only then continues on. And so you can see this structure in the Hebrew, that there's a vav consecutive, and the consecutive is continually tying these actions and these events together, but it's not there in the first 2 verses. So it's still a separation there. So I think for all of the reasons, yeah, these connect.
I was going to say, how do you respond to another potential argument, which is, referring to church history or historical understandings of Genesis? Is that one that, I know you mentioned, like, you took a very solid approach, let's just interpret scripture. How do you respond to the people that say, well, this has been the plain or understood reason historically of Genesis?
Yeah. Number one, I'm not Catholic. So
fair.
No, I'm serious. Like,
yeah.
I find this to be awfully surprising how often I do get like, what about church history arguments concerning different parts of work that I've done? And like, well, I don't see this in church history. And I'm like, I'm not Catholic. I mean, just to be blunt, like to a large degree, like scripture is my final authority is number one. Number two, my understanding is that's just not true. It's just not true. So if you do go back, yeah, there are other people that have had different views. I've asked some, Jewish guys too, like, hey, what's the thought been behind this? And he's like, this has always been a discussion and argument amongst Judaism. Like this has gone back for long time. And so to me, the fact is that if you go back and just like, oh, well, what has Judaism thought about this? And it's not been the traditional only 6,000 year view. Then okay, like it's just not true. It's kind of a talking point that other people have brought up. Oh, this has always been the classic understanding. It's false. So I just reject the claim. And then the major thing is just that it's like, yeah, well, did some people have that view? Sure. And did some people speculate and think like, oh, well, this is probably the biggest thing there is? Sure. But how many other people have actually counted all of the years from Genesis to Revelation? Not that many. Yeah, so it's really an argument that, especially if you're a Protestant, I just don't think holds water, number one, because scripture is primary. And then number two, yeah, like upon investigation, I just don't think it works.
Yeah.
So good old IP, good old inspiring philosophy. He's got some great content on this and young earth creationist movement and kind of how it all came about. So you guys should invite him. You should invite him to talk about that.
I really like him, so I want to.
We'll get to a certain size. I've been reading through 7 Days That Divide the World by John Lennox, which covers similar topics. He was listing through one of the chapters like, "Oh, this is actually always a divided topic among many Christian thinkers and prominent theologians." And so, yeah, I don't think the history argument tends to work, and it would just be probably a whataboutism. Well, you have your historical figures and I have mine. So yeah, I don't think that argument ends up holding a lot of water. So we mentioned Mark 10:6, and I don't want to I want to make sure that because one of the things I pulled, I went to Answers in Genesis, and I guess for the sake of this conversation, they're a big player and potentially a big, I don't know, quote unquote adversary to your perspective. But one of the things they put is that Jesus was a young earth creationist. How do you respond to that? And the reference they use is Mark 10:6, which again, like you said, I don't know if I completely understand, but how would you respond to something who said, well, Jesus was a young earth creationist?
I mean, they're just reading what they want to see into the text. Like I don't know any other way to say it, but it's eisegesis, like pure and simple. Like you're just reading your own conclusion into the text. So Jesus doesn't say the age of the earth anywhere. And again, like just appealing to, it's like, well, when we say in the beginning, we mean the 6 days of creation. Well, yeah, that's what we're referring to is the 6 days of creation that God created from the earth and matter that was already there. Like, so the fact that God creates in 6 days doesn't mean anything for the age of the earth. And the idea that it's like, oh, Jesus is a young earth creationist, like, all right, cool. Give me a proof text. It's like, oh, but in the beginning, yeah, he created mankind. Is like, okay, cool. Like, again, just goes back to, it's like, there's just nothing. There's nothing there.
Yeah, I would agree. I didn't like that argument when I read it.
Yeah.
Anything else on Genesis, Seth, that you have?
Well, I guess one of the things I've ran into, because I've asked questions on this for the last year, I want to say I've thought about this a little bit more. I get stuck when it seems like a lot of young earth creationists and or even, I guess, young earth creationists do this a lot. They make it a part of the gospel that the earth must be young, that the creation account must be literal in the basic understanding that we've been taught in Sunday school, because of the ramifications of evolution, or the idea of us evolving from another species that wasn't then creating God's image. So what's your answer to that, I guess?
Yeah. Let me so let me shift this if it goes along. I want to make sure that this is tying in, but let's talk about animal death, right?
Sure.
Is that kind of where a large part of it goes, right? Because to me, that's where they really dive into this notion of the gospel and stuff like that. It's like, well, if you don't believe in this, you believe in old ages, you believe in death before sin, you believe in, all this other stuff, right? And that's where it really ties in, right? So my next debate set up with Matt is supposed to be on animal death. So, so the question would be, right? Could there be, or was there, animal death before the fall? So have you guys thought through that one at all?
I mean, I've seen topics. I mean, from Inspiring Philosophy, I've seen it, but it's definitely more newly introduced to me as I'm rethinking some of the, I would say, overwhelming evidence that there is for evolution. Has made me rethink, like, okay, well, how do I think about this from a biblical worldview, and does this topple my whole Bible? Kind of like what you were talking about with your background. Like, is this, because what I've heard from atheists and skeptics is that if you believe in evolution, it topples a biblical worldview. And I was like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you run into people like IP or yourself, and you're like, okay, not necessarily that this is going to top your whole biblical worldview. So definitely something that I'm investigating more, is this idea.
This is one that I am utterly stunned. I cannot believe that it has existed so long in Christianity. My mind is honestly completely blown. This is another one where it's like, yeah, I believed all this stuff, and I've used all the young earth creationist arguments, and eventually I got around to reading the Bible and understanding what it says, and was just absolutely shocked. And so why does anyone think that there wouldn't be animal death before the fall? Like,
yeah.
Now, why would I say that? Why shouldn't I think that all the animals were herbivores, and all the animals would, of course, there wouldn't be animal death before the fall? And the very first thing is to say this one: because all of creation was mortal. Like, they weren't created immortal. And it's like, well, what do you mean they weren't created immortal? Like, I remember the first time that I said that to a very good friend of mine and a pastor, and his jaw just hit the floor. He just looked at me like, what did you just say? Like, he was just,
yeah.
And the reasoning is very, very simple. Who was supposed to eat from the tree of life? Adam and Eve, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is the tree of life made for all the animals?
No.
What do you think sustains mankind for eternity? The tree of life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if the tree of life isn't for all the animals, why would you think they live forever? Are you saying that God instantiated animals to live for forever, but man was to be mortal? Are you elevating the animals? God put animals at a higher status than mankind and said, animals, you live for forever. Adam, eat from the tree. Don't forget. Take your vitamin tree every day.
Yeah.
Like,
do you think the, I mean, a preliminary question. Do you think the animal death thing kind of stems from this? We've been talking about presupposition that people have that Eden was perfect, because they draw a parallel for eternity in heaven.
So that's exactly one of the other great parts that also is, to me, a complete shocker. Was Eden the earth?
I've never even.
Yes.
First time for me. I would think.
Yeah, I want to say yeah.
I thought it was a part of the earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a garden on the earth, or is it the whole earth?
Ooh.
I would say from.
I would say it's a garden.
We would say it's the. I would say it's the whole. Well, it's the known world, or the known earth at that time.
I would say it's a garden personally, because the fact that Adam and Eve are casted out of the garden.
Yeah. If it's the whole earth, how can they be cast out? Was it another planet? It's the whole earth, but they're cast out of the garden,
W
right?
for me.
W said.
W for me.
Yeah. So it's not the whole earth, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's perfectly fine to make a parallel between the Garden of Eden and the idea of God's holy sanctuary, holy mountain, heaven, all those things, the place where God dwells. That's exactly correct. But it's not the whole earth. And it even says that God placed Adam in the garden. He created a garden. He placed Adam in the garden. And then ultimately, what's he do? He ultimately kicks he ultimately kicks mankind out of the garden in the end. Right? So, so what's the problem? Yeah, go ahead.
I guess an offshoot question, unless you're not done.
No, good.
Answering. Was suffering then outside of the garden already?
Yeah, why not? For animals. Why wouldn't you have suffering? So let's go back a little bit to this animal death and think about this for a little bit, right? When you look outside, and I actually find this rather ironic as well. When you look at Answers in Genesis website, right? One of the things they talk about is the incredible creation, right? Yep. Animals couldn't have been designed, created this way. Evolution never could have done it because of the incredible complexity of animals, right? One of the examples they even give has to do with snakes and the poisonous venom sacs that they have. And they produce exactly the correct amount on either side. And if they had produced more on one side than the other, and then it wouldn't actually function properly, snakes wouldn't be able to kill their prey, all this stuff, right? So it's like, okay, wait a minute. You're saying that that's a magnificent, glorious, and beautiful. But according to the rest of your doctrine, that's wicked, evil, and sinful. Right? Because what? Venom and poison are there for killing.
Right.
It's there for killing. So the entire point of this is that it's like, okay, so in your view, all of the animals were herbivores, right? And then after the fall, all of the animals changed instantly. Snakes instantly began producing venom. Teeth began to grow out of lions' mouths. Spiders stopped eating broccoli and started eating flies. So what you're telling me is that the second largest miracle in the entire universe took place, and there isn't one verse, not a single verse about the largest miracle in the entire earth.
Off
all
camera.
of creation completely changed.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, how many animals eat other animals today? Right? Frogs eat flies. Like, what were spiders supposed to have eaten? Right? So it's like there's this massive, dramatic change of the entire ecosystem. And in essence, on the young Earth model, they believe in evolution more than anyone else does. For all the animals evolved instantly after creation or after the fall. Right? So none of the animals are the same. And it's like, okay, how on earth was that supposed to have happened? You know, they're like, oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, biblically speaking, how do you, I think one of the big, I guess, apprehensions to adapting evolution or just understanding evolution as science understands it is the common ancestor evolution. We all evolved from a common ancestor, and that somehow violates a biblical worldview. So, so what do you, how do you fit that into understanding Genesis of if human beings are created in God's image? How does that make sense? Are there a slightly less version of created in God's image, and then we were declared God's image because we evolved as such, or were we created separately than the other creation that evolved? How do you parse that?
Yeah, so I love this question. It's really, really important. Number one is you want to go and look at like scientific models. If you're like one of the science guys and you're interested in that discussion, you should go check out Joshua Swamidas's work on this topic. And he's basically shown that it's like, hey, look, Adam and Eve, you know, all of mankind could have come from an original pair. And he's shown models scientifically at how it could be an earlier pair, such as something much closer to a young Earth creationist model, 6,000 to 10,000 years. And he's also shown how it can work through a very, very long distance pair, one of like hundreds of thousands of years ago and stuff like that. So scientifically wise, I would refer as far as like, how is it possible to Joshua's work? Now, concerning theologically and the concern here, this gets into another very, very deep topic, which I've spent a bunch of time on and is really, really also cool. And also I don't know, to me, another slam on academics, but it has to do with the image of God. It has to do with the image of God, right? So I'm sure you guys know, what is the image of God? All right, that's a little bit of a joke. So sorry, cool joke.
Yeah, a little bit.
No, but
As you
that's
Yeah.
the big question, right?
Yeah.
What does the image of God mean? Because
Mhm.
ultimately, the presupposition is that we know what it means. And this is why it can't work with evolution, right? And so it's like, oh, well, is it our physical composition? Is it a fact that I have fingertips? And is that what makes me the image of God? Right? So I'm not going to berate you too much more with deep questions like that, but I'll cut
No,
to a
they're
little
good
bit further
questions.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is how I think. I think in questions. And the image of God question is super, super important because so many Christians, we build many, many doctrines and philosophies and theologies based on the image of God. And most people don't know what it means.
Mm.
And it's just like, it's crazy to me how many people like, it's like, oh yeah, well, we do this for this and this and this. And it's like, well, what is the image of God? And then they can't answer the question. And it's like, how can you keep talking about stuff that you don't even know what it means? I'm lost.
Yeah.
So what it means to be made in the image of God is that it is a calling to be God's representative on the earth. Okay? It is a calling to be God's representative on the earth. That's what it means to be made in the image of God. And so, oddly enough, this can work with evolution. Now, personally, I'm not currently an evolutionist. I'm not a theistic evolutionist like IP. I do like him, though. But it does or can work with evolution. And the reason that it can or does is because let's imagine you had a bunch of humanoids or whatever. And so at some point they reach this stage. And then God says, you know what? I will choose mankind, humans. They will be my representative on the earth. And that's what it means. They are God's image in that they are meant to represent God on the earth. They are the embodiment of God's representation on the earth. And so God could have chose somebody else in a sense, but he chose us. And so we're meant to live up to that calling. And that's why what? We're meant to conform to the image of Christ in the New Testament because we're to be Christ's image bearers on the earth, right? We're Christ's representatives. And that's even going exactly along with the Great Commission, right? For Christ says, right, all authority in heaven and earth has been given unto me. Therefore, go into all the world, preaching the gospel, proclaiming and teaching them all that I have taught you. We're his representatives. And that's what it means to be made in the image of God. And that's perfectly, coinciding with evolutionary theory and a handful of others.
Would evolutionary theory call into question the idea of a literal Adam and Eve, though? Because it would be saying that like God would have then had to also picked out two specific people or a specific Adam to bring into the Garden of Eden and then leave the rest of the then humanoids.
It doesn't have to. So even Joshua Swamidas, that's part of the point of his work is that he's showing like, yeah, you could have an original pair. You could have called out unique Adam and Eve. And not to mention, actually, I don't think that it is necessarily true that Adam and Eve, let's imagine that we had an evolved mankind. Okay. Let's just imagine evolution was true. We have an evolved mankind. And then let's imagine, oh man, I know some of my other Christian friends are going to hate me for all of this, but, but you could have a specially uniquely created man, Adam, in the midst of the rest of creation. So in other words, you could have all these other humanoids, and then God specially creates Adam from the dust of the ground, from basically no other human.
Mm-hmm.
And so Adam would be a unique special creation, just like Christ. So both would be initial first creations. And I think that's perfectly compatible anyway with talking about that, and doesn't really interrupt anything. Just saying that there is evolutionary theory does not entail that Adam must have been part of that process.
Mm-hmm. And God has shown a propensity to choose certain people of certain time. I mean, that's the nation of Israel. So he could have selected Adam in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that is actually exactly what some people argue, is that Adam is chosen just like Israel is chosen out from amongst of people.
This is
a lot of hums today.
A lot of questions. A lot of questions. We got to go back. Yeah. How do you so some people take a literary contention with your interpretation of Genesis, where they say, you know, the Hebrew word yom means in the context a literal day. How do you respond to that literary argument?
Well, yeah, I think it's literal 6 24-hour days. I mean, even Michael Jones thinks it's a literal 6 24-hour days. So it doesn't really do anything. We say, like, yeah, there's 6 24-hour days leading up to the 7th day. That sounds great. I agree.
Yeah. So you would agree that the yom in that context is correctly understood to be a literal 24-hour days, but the question is before then.
Yep. That's it.
That's good.
Yeah, I've never thought about it like this. I know you said that a lot of people say that, but I literally have never thought about it like this.
No, but that's why I want to have the conversation.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
I was wondering,
because you know what?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, just the one thing, and that's just that everything that I've told you is right out of the Bible. Like, nothing I've told you need special knowledge. You don't need to go read John Walton or anybody else. I'm telling you, this is what's in the Bible. Like, just go read it, you know, and you think about it carefully, but that's part of my whole point, is that, like, so many people, I don't know, they are interpreting and giving their view without even having all the information. And that's what I want to suggest, is that, you know what? If we go back to the Bible, you'll see how much light it sheds on all the commentaries.
Yeah.
I want to, okay. Because we're talking about light, and shout out to one of the other apologist guys who actually messaged me. I'm so sorry I haven't gotten your video done, but he asked a little bit more about the light thing. I actually was just getting over a cold. And so anyway, I want to explain a little bit about the light. And so here's one of the other really big ones. It kills me. And I literally just practically slapped myself when I saw this one too. But what is the light on day one?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a lot of thinking. I mean, I've heard that it's like just the spirit of God. The God is light. So God's giving off that light. I've heard that.
Yep.
And then obviously I've heard your argument, but you're about to give it, so I'm not gonna give that one.
Oh, you have heard mine.
Well, just from the debate. I think you touched a little bit on the debate about what the light was.
Well, sure. Just read it from the Bible. The Bible tells us what it is.
Yeah. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. So the light is day.
That's it. The light is day.
But there's the sun wasn't created yet.
Right.
The light is the day. So I'll go ahead and give you a little bit more full explanation now. Because I was planning to do an independent video and stuff on this today, but the more full explanation so is sort of what Seth is saying, like, yeah, but the sun wasn't created yet. Okay, but just on a basic reading, what is the light? The light is the day. So since the text clearly says the light is the day, I don't know why there's all these arguments about what the light is. Oh, it's this energy, it's light that's just emanating from nowhere, all that stuff. So you are presupposing that the sun isn't created yet. So you're thinking that the sun is materially created on day 4, right? Okay. But why doesn't the text go with the pattern of everything that's happening? So days 1 through 3 are all about separating, right? Separates the light from the darkness, the water from above and the water below, water from the land, right? So if you follow the pattern, the separation is occurring between everything else that is already there. That is already there. The key point, when we talk about day and night, right? What's it in reference to? It's only in reference to the earth. It's only in reference to the earth. In outer space, do you think there's day and night? No. So day and night is a reference to the earth, right? When it says there's darkness, what is the darkness in reference to? It's in reference to the earth. There's darkness where? On the earth. Is there darkness in space? In a sense, not technically. It's just space, right? You know,
there's just void.
Stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's void. So what it says on day 4 is that, oh, yeah. And God created the 2 great lights. But more importantly is it says why he created them and what he created them for. And the point is not that he created them. It doesn't say, oh, and he created the great lights. He created them to govern the day and the night. So the point is why he's creating them. Because, and this is parallel, again, as far as everything goes, right? With mankind, right? Because then when he creates man and he explains, why did I create man? I created man to have dominion and to rule over the earth. Right? So remember what I said is like, oh, he created man in God's image, or man is created in God's image, right? And what that means is that man is God's representative, right? What about that is physical? Being God's representative is not physical. It's not a material creation of man. So there's no material creation of man being talked about when it says he created man in God's image. You might have to think about that one a little while. That one is probably one of the harder ones to swallow. I'll be honest.
There's no material creation when he creates man in his own image.
And the sun. That there's not a material creation of the sun. Yeah. And so instead what he's doing is he's establishing, the birds of the air dominate the sky and the sea creatures, right? They dominate the waters. And certainly back in ancient texts, right? That's how it would be. Man did not have, he didn't conquer the waters and the air back then. Today we have more control over the air with airplanes. But again, that was thousands of years ago, no matter who you count it as. So each one is kind of dominating its own arena. And what? Mankind is the one to be set over to rule over what? The earth. So again, I'm just saying it's like, well, look, if you're showing a literary structure, what I proposed matches the text and what everyone else proposed doesn't make any sense. Because even back then, they knew that the light comes from the sun.
Right. And so, I mean, this kind of goes into, you said this right at the outset, that young earth creationists are deceiving people, and that's extreme language. But
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of leads to this, what Seth and I are running into, and we're more open and to these types of questions. We're just trying to learn, because we were certainly raised in a young earth creationist household and perspective. So
You guys? No.
yes, us, definitely. We were young earth to it, but it was also, it's just, it's kind of just, you assume that it's you assume that that's all there is, really. And that's because people like Answers in Genesis, to your point, are deceiving people into thinking that way, that you have to believe this. And so I don't know, I was wondering, Adam, how do you think they're deceiving people, or what's the, or maybe this is a separate question, but what's the motivation behind deceiving people, deceiving believers?
So deceiving is a very heavy language, and I do not want to label that on everyone that's in the Answers in Genesis camp. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. So
yeah, you could soften it if you want to. It doesn't have to be deceive, maybe misguiding or misleading.
There is a degree. There are some degrees which I am very, very skeptical that some of it is not much more outright. And if I ever got the time, I don't know. I would love to do a documentary, and I would love to get behind the scenes, get some deeper interviews to hammer out some stuff. But here are some of the parts, as far as I understand, and when I've done any investigations in which these are my understandings, and this is where I think things are incredibly, where you get into, it's like, oh, they're misleading at best and outright deceiving you at worst. Okay, it would be this area, one of these areas. There's more, but science. Do Answers in Genesis, do they make you think that there are scientific answers for young earth creationism and their views? Yes or no?
Yeah, they would like you to think so.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. If they had no Bible, would they still come to the conclusion that the earth is young based on science alone?
No. I mean, I would only say potentially yes, because they use such a, I mean, I feel like they use their own interpretation of science. Like they use their science backwards, but I don't know, maybe not. I just feel like their science is it's such a narrow way to use science that they come to certain answers with these questions. So I don't know, but you're asking good questions, and Seth's probably going to win again.
Yeah. And every single one of them that I've asked so far, the answer is no. The answer is no. Yeah.
Then they're doing science bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even Jason Lyle, who is one of the strongest proponents for young earth creationism and everything like that, he said, yeah, outside of a biblical box, you would not or could not come to a young earth interpretation. Ken Hovind said it too on his debate with Destiny. Anyone can go and look it up. Unfortunately, you can't clip it, but you can look it up. In his debate with Destiny, he said he cannot prove young earth creationism through science. Okay, so what kind of science are you talking about then? How is it scientific evidence if you take away the Bible and your scientific evidence disappears?
It's not.
That's not.
It's a presupposition.
You've decided this is the begin point, and now you eliminate any information that is to the contrary. There's nothing scientific about that. That is extremely disingenuous. And to me, my primary point is that the vast majority of young earth creationists do not know that. So I don't know how else to put it, but when I studied cults, that's the deal, right? Is that the cult leader at the top he knows everything. After that, it's way more diluted, right?
Yeah.
Everyone else really believes it, but they don't know that some of the things that he says are not really based in reality. And then, of course, down at the lowest level, they don't know any of it, right? They're way less clueless. And so I would love to see, and I know, look, I have friends that are young earth creationists, several of them, but part of my major thing is that I think that most of them, they're not aware of the facts. And that's the point. That's why I want education of the facts. If we can all sit here and agree on the facts, then we can go somewhere. But if you can't even agree to what is the truth, then we're in big trouble. And the point is this, if you're telling everybody, we have scientific evidence, we have scientific evidence, we have scientific evidence, but not a single person outside of your group can see it. What kind of scientific glasses are you wearing? Right? And then they just try and poison the well by saying that's because everybody else is possessed by evolution and the demon that's lurking behind every closed door. And it's like, okay, there are good Christian scientists, and they're also saying no. You know, Hugh Ross's quote that he uses anyway, it's from somebody else, but he said, like, there's more scientific data for a flat earth than there is for a young one. And he as well, like my major thing that was extremely eye-opening to me was that when I started to listen to Ken Ham, Jason Lyle, all these people, and they admit outside of the Bible, they would not come to the conclusion of a young earth. That's devastating. How can you possibly come and tell me about science? Why are you talking to me? I don't understand. So that's why I do sometimes say that to me, it's deceiving. It's deceiving at worst. And the fact that, they know that they can't make a scientific case. Sure, scientists come to faith. They believe the Bible. That's great. And our scripture should be our authority. But if they've mistakenly made a biblical translation and you're basing all of your scientific data on a faulty biblical understanding, okay, So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm a little bit more passionate about some of this stuff, because it's one thing to be like, have a different view. It's another thing to be purporting something that everybody else doesn't understand. They're taking completely different view. So,
and I think, one of the things that was I don't know if you brought this up, Adam, in the debate or afterwards in your recap, but I know historically we've seen this happen before with the geocentric interpretation of the Bible that everyone held, which was, and they use scripture to justify this belief, and they, persecuted Galileo over it, which is that, the Bible has to be the center of the universe because the pillar of the earths or whatever verse. And now you ask Christians that today and they're like, no, science is this. Like they that's not even a question in their mind. They just agree with the science there. And it seems like there's a parallel to what young earth creationism is kind of playing by the same playbook as those that, those that persecuted, especially those that are in power, those that persecuted Galileo, which was saying you're violating some sort of Christian doctrine by introducing the science and the scientific reading, which is apparently violating some sort of interpretive reading of scripture.
100%. If you're a young earth creationist, you should be a geocentrist, period. Every young earth creationist should be a geocentrist. If you are not a geocentrist, it is because you have allowed science to change your mind. That's it. Pure and simple. There is no other biblical explanation. There's 10 times the data for biblical data on geocentrism than there is a young earth. I can make way more arguments, concerning that idea. When you talk about like, oh, let's read Joshua and the sun stood still. This was the biblical argument back then, right? Very, very strong argument. Everywhere you look in scripture. Oh yeah. The sun did this, the sun did this, the sun rises, the sun falls. Every time you see the sun setting, guess what? That's proof of the sun moving. in the Bible. How else can you read it? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more biblical evidence for a geocentrism and the sun moving around than there is a young earth. And so if you're not a geocentrist, but you're still a young earth creationist, it's because you're inconsistent. It's because you've allowed science to influence your interpretation of the Bible. And you know what? You should allow science. You know what? The only reason that we understand, that, oh, well, we're not the center of the universe is because of science. And we understand these things to be, what do they call it right now? For some reason, it's slipping my mind. It's where we read it as we perceive things. So I can't think of the term right now, but
I'm trying to think of the, well, yeah.
But anyway, yes, I think it's a very strong argument.
I was hoping, I mean, I'll just ask you, how did you think your debate with Apolojedi went? Did you like how it went? Did you, because are you not, is this your first time kind of dipping your toes into the debate foray? Did you feel comfortable? Did you like how the argument went? Yeah, I don't know. Just some recap for us.
Yeah, it was the first live debate that I've had. So he will forever be down in history as my first debate ever. On stream anyway. Obviously argue with people in person, but nobody counts those. Yeah, of course, overall, I felt like it went okay. I was a little unhappy with some of my things. I definitely had a little bit more work. I wanted to be a little bit more clear on some of my openings and closing presentations. I was pretty happy with the cross-examination and stuff like that. By and large, that was probably the biggest thing, was I just wanted to present a little bit more clarity in some of my stuff. I was still trying to work it out. Yeah, overall, I think that it was a pretty good showing. I think that I was able to present and show kind of a new case. And I think that my case is fairly strong, because I just don't think that most of his arguments really address the primary point that I want to make. And that's to show that Genesis 1, verses 1 and 2 show an existing pre-creation before day one. And I think that that's the central piece. And, he doesn't grant that presupposition, and okay, fine. But what are the arguments against it? I think that the evidence that I offered are quite abundant, and I didn't really hear any strong refutations to the evidence that I presented, rather it be the structures, rather it be the Hebrew Vav consecutive. Now, we did have just a disagreement there. But, I did try and go back and look through the homework. I don't see any Vav consecutives in the first two verses. So again, the Hebrew argument stands as far as I'm concerned. All the arguments that I put forward to me were not refuted. So I think that it went pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. 10 out of 10. I thought I definitely could see just from his questions that I think your arguments were a little bit more novel and new to him, where he had some prepared written questions that in the cross-examination just kind of fell flat because you had quick responses like, well, that doesn't apply to my argument. You're arguing with someone that's not there. So yeah, I definitely think it went well. So I have another debate coming up on the exact same topic. So me and Ben, Macrophage, we should be debating, just looking, going to get a host and figure out a few more details, but we'll be debating the exact same topic. Ben, I think, will come much more prepared, only because, of course, he has already got to watch the first debate. So I know he's already taken notes and everything like that. So that one will be much more lively, I think. And it will be a lot more direct, since he'll be, I think, attacking the points that I made. And I totally understand, Apologeti's position on this, because it was, I came bringing a bunch of new things, new arguments, and nuanced positions. And so, if you've never heard your opponent's points before, it's much more difficult to prepare for a debate like that. And, I had much more of an opportunity to prepare for his arguments and his thoughts than he had for mine, And so, for an example, he actually prepared some things against ancient Near Eastern position, but I didn't use really arguments from that position. So Yeah.
Hmm.
That's what I noticed. Yeah. We're dwindling on time, and so I want to address some of the comments, and maybe we can talk through some of. Hey, well, this is PF Jung. He's I mean, just some history, backstory. PF Jung was our first guy that we interviewed. Kind of big fan of his channel and his content. Kind of came from him, and yeah, his quest. It's kind of Adam. You're our third interview, and each interview we've been getting quests from the people that we interview, because PF Jung introduced this analogy where he said, you know, we're just starting this journey. We're in the beginning of a video game, right? And PF Jung was the first the first feudal lord that we met at the first town.
That's awesome.
And he gave us this quest, which, because, you know, we had some nuance, which I'll just plug the conversation. We talked about cultural Christianity. He's a big fan of Jordan Peterson. We obviously said some disparaging things about Jordan Peterson's theology in the terms. Just throwing out the conversation was interesting, though. And he gave us this quest to then destroy dispensationalism, or this type of fundamentalist reading. So I was like, yeah, well, we need to talk to some experts before we start dipping our toes into that type of talk. So we're talking to you, Adam. You're our third feudal lord.
Well, don't forget to have me back on to destroy dispensationalism.
That would be good. Yeah, no, we would love to do that.
I'm an amillennialist. Are you
Okay.
guys familiar with that term?
I'm familiar with the term, and I want to look more into my eschatological. For reference, the big. I don't know if you've seen from our content, but my background is like more politics and government. That's what I studied in college. And so when the Israel-Palestine conflict broke out, and there was a bunch of people in my Christian circles had such set opinions on it, and I was like, well, where does this stem from? And so that's when I did a deep dive into the history of Israel-Palestine. That's when I did a deep dive into the theology of it, and I was like, oh, this is dispensationalism that leads to this very strict interpretation of that, which leads to that impact there in that actual region. And so I don't want to, so that was like a whole intellectual journey I went on to discover that. So aside from that, that's how I was kind of introduced to dispensationalism, at least outlined the history of it. So yeah, not a fan, I have to say. In short, not a fan of dispensationalism.
I don't necessarily disagree with them about everything in the world, but enough.
Yeah, enough. Yeah. I totally agree. So let me we got some more comments, and so maybe this is for you, Adam, that you can address.
Hey,
I think viewing so this is probably a fan of yours. So I think viewing our universe as being like a simulation relative to God fits very well too. Simulations are used by humans to accelerate time, and it allows out a sequence additions. So I'm guessing this has to do with the age of the Earth. Could it all have been simulated in a certain time? Something along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, simulation theories can be really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I guess my really short answer on the idea of simulation theory, though, is I'm not sure that it's parsimonious. In other words, like, I'm just not sure that a lot of the simulation theories are the simplest explanation. And so it seems to me like some of these other things could be simpler explanations. And then therefore it's like, well, why wouldn't I prefer these simpler explanations?
Yeah.
So
Searching had more questions for you too. Concepts like day and night, atmosphere, and land is designed by God and set up on days 1 to 3 on a pre-existing Earth. So I think that's kind of what you were talking about.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree, buddy. I agree, Searching.
Last one here. One day outside of a simulation can jump through billions of days in a simulation. See current developments in AI. So kind of going into that theory. I've kind of thought about this idea, Adam, and I wanted to... Seth and I were kind of talking about this idea of
Josh talked about this for about like 3 to 4 hours one night, I think.
Well, I was just thinking, like, what does it mean? It's hard for us to... What does it mean for God to be timeless? And
So
that was the question. That was the question that I was wrestling with. Like, could in an instant God do billions of years at the same time because he's timeless? Could he work in different time moments at the same time? So it's like, I don't know. Like, it was
So it's
something I was
a
just thinking
day
about. Like,
for
what is it?
us, though.
Yeah, what does it really mean for God to be timeless? Could God operate a billion-year sequence, or I guess, to Searching's point, a simulation in an instant because he's timeless? And I don't know. What do you think about that hypothesis in theory? Probably silly.
I don't believe that God is timeless. So
Okay.
R.T. Mullins has written a book, The End of the Timeless God. And by and large, I would agree with that part of the view. Actually, I'm planning on having R.T. Mullins on my channel, hopefully this week. And so he's written a lot on the theory of time and God and time and the relation there and all of that. And in short, yeah, like, so it's very much been this traditional view of this idea of God's like outside of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it basically doesn't make sense. And yeah, I reject that view. I don't think that God is like outside of time in a way that, okay, nothing works. So, because it's like, oh, well, he's outside of time, but then he answers prayers and he does this and he does that. And it's like, okay, like it really doesn't end up making for much of a coherence. And so like a lot of these theories about God doing all these things outside of time, but then he only does this little bit inside of time. I don't think they're actually coherent. So I feel like people fit a lot of their theology in there in this mystery box where somehow things just work. They don't.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So you think, okay. So you think God is, there's a time to God. It's interesting.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So
would you say, yeah, would you say God just like sees the future then, just in time?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So God's not, is God experiencing time all at once or no? With this view, he's not.
No. I mean, you to say experiencing time all at once? No.
Yeah.
I'll give you like one short example as to why I don't think that's plausible. This is just one. There's a lot of different things you could talk about, but let's say that we took the eternal, timeless God for 1 second, right? That God experiences all moments as equally real right now. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Jesus exists on the cross in eternity. God basically suffers ultimate hell forever. I don't find that to be plausible. I mean, that's what it would mean, right? If God experiences all moments as ultimately real, then basically, yeah, God endures hell for eternity. So anyway, that's like one really short, brief one that I just don't think that that's true.
Yeah, it
like,
doesn't fit into that.
Jesus says it's finished. It's over. It's done. Right? Jesus was on the cross. He is no longer on the cross. But instead, you should be Catholic and hold one of those little crosses with a Jesus on it because he's still on the cross.
Right.
In that view.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd have to dig deeper to even have any bounce back questions because that's
I don't really know what to say to that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.